More and more Americans, particularly young people, are buying into one of the biggest scams of the past half-century, libertarianism. According to new Pew polls, Libertarian presidential candidate and former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson now has the support of 10% of voters, enough to put him third behind Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, respectively, and 5% less than the 15% threshold he needs to get into the debates this fall. During an appearance on Fox So-Called News on Friday, Johnson said he was confident that he would eventually cross that 15% threshold and argued that there was much broader support for his party and its worldview than most people realize.
I think we're going to qualify. I think that all of our analytics are doubling about every 3 weeks, and so right now we're reaching about 27 million people on social media. Given the amount of money that we're now raising, I think there's a real opportunity to inform 70% of the population about who we are. Myself, Bill Weld, my running mate, two former Republican governors that got reelected in heavily Democrat states, being fiscally conservative and socially inclusive. I think there's a lot to be said there.
But are Gary Johnson and the party he's representing this election cycle really just about fiscal conservatism and social inclusiveness? Or are those words just cover for what libertarians are really all about, the fundamentally anti-democratic corporatist takeover of our republic? Joining me now is someone who knows this topic inside out. Mark Ames is the co-host of Radio War Nerd, contributor to Pando Daily, and the author of Going Postal, Rage, Murder, and Rebellion, from Reagan's Workplaces to Clinton's Columbine and beyond. In 2013, Mark wrote what I think is the definitive history of libertarianism. It originally appeared in NSFW Corp and was titled The True History of Libertarianism in America, a Phony Ideology to Promote a Corporate Agenda. Mark Ames, welcome back.
Thanks for having me on again, Tom.
Great to have you with us. So, how did libertarianism start?
Well, if you go back to its beginnings, libertarians themselves will tell you that it began with a think tank called the Foundation for Economic Education, the FEE, that was founded in 1946-47 by a former executive in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And as hearings revealed by a Democrat from Pennsylvania, a pro-labor Democrat, who then died unexpectedly and unfortunately, in 1950, the Foundation for Economic Education was doing all kinds of illegal lobbying, and it turned out that it was, as he said, backed by the biggest companies in America, the whole Fortune 500, you know, all the big automakers, all the big mining companies and oil companies and so on. And, you know, if you go back to the history of libertarianism, so it started really in the wake of the New Deal, and especially right in the beginning of the Cold War. It's a very extreme, pro-corporate, anti-labor, anti-socialist ideology. And there have really been three major sponsors of it. First, the DuPonts, chemicals, and then the Pew family. We forget Pews were very right-wing oil magnates. And then the Kochs. So they're all oil and petrochemicals peoples.
Yeah. Now, David Koch ran in 1980 for vice president on the Libertarian ticket. And I find it interesting comparing in the 1980 platform, in which they were just quite blunt about what they were all about, versus the 2016 platform, which is sufficiently weasel-wordy that I think a lot of people, particularly young people who don't know this history, you know, read it and go, oh. For example, this is the Libertarian Party platform that Koch ran on the topic of education. He wrote, "We advocate the complete separation of education and state. Government schools lead to the indoctrination of children and interfere with the free choice of individuals. Government ownership, operation, regulation, and subsidy of schools and colleges should be ended. We support compulsory education laws, and we call for the immediate repeal of such laws. We support the repeal of all taxes on the income or property of private schools, whether for profit or not for profit." So that was their language in 2008. In other words, no more public schools, no more public education, no money for colleges, no more community colleges, no more land-grant colleges, nothing. If you're born rich, you get to go to school. If not, good luck barefoot and, you know, in the backyard in the dirt. But in 2016, excuse me, they cleaned up the language And I doubt most millennials realize that they're calling for the end of all this public education. Here's the language now. Education is best provided by the free market, achieving greater quality, accountability, and efficiency with more diversity of choice. Recognizing that the education of children is a parental responsibility, we would restore authority to parents to determine the education of their children without interference from government. Parents should have control of the responsibility for all funds expended for their child's education. How is it, Mark Ames, that everybody from millennials to Anderson Cooper don't get what they're saying here?
They don't, I don't, you know, it's a good question. I mean, look, it has to do with how the Libertarians and Gary Johnson, how they kind of position themselves, right, and what they emphasize. And so if they're really trying to reach out to young people, which they often are, and they're trying to reach out to progressives who are disillusioned, as they were, you know, a lot of progressives were disillusioned with Carter in 1980, and a lot of progressives are not totally happy with Hillary Clinton today. So they're going to emphasize how they're allegedly pro-pot. Very pro-pot, and that really appeals to millennials. Oh, they're pro-pot, it's libertarians are pro-pot. Well, actually, though, if you parse it, they're not really pro-pot. What they are for is ending federal laws that ban marijuana, and they really kind of just stick with marijuana on this. But they're for states, they're for allowing states to tyrannize pot smokers as they see fit. They just think when states, lock you up for 30 years for smoking a joint, that's not tyranny, but if the federal government's involved, that's tyranny. So, I mean, it's not really that progressive, and I don't know, it's a good question. I mean, I remember when I was really young in the 70s that liberals really owned the pot legalization issue.
Yeah.
And, frankly, after 8 years of Bill Clinton, they really lost that issue, and so the libertarians came in and kind of just snowed everyone over. Gary Johnson, by the way, is also for vouchers, so state-funded vouchers for parents to be able to put their kids in religious schools.
Yeah,
it's like a Bobby Jindal thing.
And the ultimate libertarian goal is to have no money at all going to schools in any way. That basically, it's like you're on your own. I mean. In fact, that should be their slogan, I would say. On trade, yeah. I thought this was fascinating, and this is in the 2016 Libertarian Party platform. You can see it at lp.org/platform. We support the removal of government impediments to free trade, political freedom, and escape from tyranny. Demand that individuals not be unreasonably constrained by government in the crossing of political boundaries. Economic freedom demands the unrestricted movement of human as well as financial capital across national borders. In other words, if one of these billionaires who funds the Libertarian Party wants to get a whole bunch of cheap labor for their factory, they should be able to call up another billionaire down in Honduras or Nicaragua or Mexico and say, hey, you got a couple thousand really poor people willing to work for 50 cents an hour, because, by the way, another part of the platform is to do away with the minimum wage laws. You got 1,000 people willing, 50, sure, yeah, set them up. No more borders, no more immigration laws. Again, how can, I get these millennials calling into my show, particularly, and I don't mean to pick on millennials, but because I was there in 1976, I thought I was a libertarian. I had a bumper sticker that said "Freedom Works," right? I mean, it's like when you're young, it's like this sounds so cool, but it's like this is craziness, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you dig in a little bit, even this year, even just this year, Gary Johnson has gone in front of large audiences and he described himself as Sharia-phobic. I mean, the guy is Donald Trump with a bong. Basically, he's called for federal laws banning the burqa. And that's to one audience. Then to another audience, he'll talk about pot again.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I always said that libertarians are Republicans who want to smoke dope and get laid because they want to decriminalize pot and prostitution. But here's another one. This is support for the unemployed, working people, and the poor. In 1980, they say, we support an end to all welfare plans and provisions of tax-supported services for children. We oppose all government welfare, relief projects, and aid to the poor programs. All these government programs are privacy-invading, paternalistic, demeaning, and inefficient. The proper source of help for such persons is the voluntary efforts of private groups and individuals. Now, they no longer have that specific language in the platform. Instead, there's a whole bunch of platitudes about individual liberty. What do they mean when they say individual liberty?
Property, that the rich should be able to spend and do with their property what they want to. So abolish all corporate taxes, abolish all income taxes, and subsidize the rich by taking out, by taking out debt. I mean, we should look back at how Gary Johnson, there is a record. He actually did run something for a while, and that's been very well covered up too. If millennials knew about that, they might think twice. He was the governor of New Mexico from 1994 to 2002. He personally intervened to overturn, they had a ban on the death penalty there. He was against that, and he tried hard to execute people. He wasn't able to in time. He basically turned New Mexico into a laboratory for privatizing prisons. And New Mexico, is the poorest state, has the highest poverty rate in the country. So he took money on one hand from Wackenhut, which is now GEO, and then privatized between a third and half of the prison population. It immediately created so many problems, riots, murders in the prisons, that he then started transferring his prison population out to supermax prisons in Virginia. And he got criticized by Human Rights Watch for this. They were just appalled. They couldn't believe this. At the same time, he stiffened penalties. So he instituted these 3 strikes, you're outlaws, mandatory, you must serve 85% of your sentence if you did any kind of violent crime. So he didn't give judges any leeway. He was a hardcore far right winger. And last thing, Tom, one of his signature, projects when he was governor was this $500 million widening of a highway road. Guess who that $500 million was paid to?
Who?
The Koch brothers, Koch Industries, which used to have a major asphalt business, and they were big funders of his campaign.
I'm
and
shocked.
Afterwards, he went to work for the Cato
shocked.
Institute.
There's gambling in Casablanca. Mark Ames, great to have you with us, Mark. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tom.